it's 2 o'clock. Let's get started. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to CPICS's first webinar of the year. I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. We're at the midpoint of a different kind of school year. I just want to take the time to thank you for joining us today. I took a look at registration and there are quite a few new names. So if you're not a school member, please consider joining our independent charter school community. We're currently accepting half-year membership at a discounted rate. So for those of you who don't know, CPICS connects independent charter school leaders and communities by sharing effective practices through our network, including webinars like these. As I mentioned, this has been a different kind of school year with many challenges and I'm sure successes. Part of why we're doing this is to help with those challenges. So today we're here to discuss managing HR during these challenging times. Here to help us are supporters who have been with CPICS from the beginning, Trinet. Very special thanks to them for organizing this for you all today. So I'm going to give the floor to April, who will kick things off. If you have any questions about CPICS, feel free to send me an email and I can put all that info in the chat box. All right, so take it away, April.
Hi, everybody, and thanks, Edward and CPIC, for having us collaborate on this extremely valuable panel. We're super excited today to kick off managing human resources at charter schools during these challenging times. Before I introduce our esteemed panelists, which I'm very excited to have on the call, I wanted to just let everybody know that we want this to be as interactive as possible. So there is a chat box. We will be checking it throughout the presentation and the Q&A. So I'd love to be able to get any questions that you have. Right before this webinar, I was actually scrolling LinkedIn and I came across Adam Grant had posted, you know, he's promoting his book, Think Again, and he's an organizational psychologist and a professor at Wharton Business School. He says, saying I don't know doesn't reveal ignorance. It reflects confident humility. Insecurity drives us to pretend we have the answers. Confident humility gives us the courage to ask questions. You can't learn if you can't admit you have something to learn. So we want this to be, you guys are all in the education space, you get it. We are all here to learn and hopefully there'll be some great takeaways for you, but we want to do this to make it as valuable as possible for you. So please use that chat box. I am, just to introduce myself, I'm going to be the moderator today. I'm a senior HR consultant for Trinet. Trinet is a professional employer organization. The easiest way to put it is we're a one-stop shop for human resources. My focus is working in the nonprofit and education sector, helping organizations reduce and contain HR operational costs, mitigate risk, and attract talent by using enterprise benefit offerings. So I'm very dedicated to strengthening the nonprofit sector by providing educational webinars like this and excited to moderate this panel today. So now I'm going to introduce our panelists. First up, we have James Stovall. He is the Vertical Product Executive for Trinet. He was the former CEO of Little Bird HR, a Manhattan-based PEO that provided HR benefits and payroll support specifically tailored to charter schools. He's worked with hundreds of charter schools and is definitely a subject matter expert when it comes to HR efficiencies. Little Bird was acquired by Trinet in July, and so now we're fortunate enough to have James leading our product team to tailor our solution to meet the unique needs of schools across the country. James is a graduate of Howard University and also received his law degree from Howard. So welcome, James.
Good to be here.
Next on the panel, and really grateful for stepping in here for us, Dr. Stanton Brown. He's the Executive Director for Northside Charter High School. It's an independent charter school serving students in grades 9 to 12 in North Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Stan has a doctorate in education from Fordham, an MBA from Harvard, as well as a Bachelor's of Science from the University of Maryland. Dr. Brown has been a leader in the education space, researching and developing viable solutions for increasing educational pathways for underrepresented communities. Dr. Brown, we're really excited to have you here as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And our next panelist, he's going to be joining here in the next 10 minutes. His name is David Noah. He's the founding principal for Urban Assembly Charter School for Computer Science. This is the first career technical education charter school open to grades 9 through 12 located in the Bronx, New York. He's an extremely experienced school leader with a track record of delivering great results for kids and earning the trust of families and teachers. His school impressively ranks the top 1.5% in the state. He's broadly experienced educator with a varied background in many areas relevant to our panel today, by starting and running great schools and curriculum design, teacher and principal development, performance management, data-driven instruction, classroom technology, differentiated learning, and is also very versed in school and employment law. He is a graduate of the University of Chicago with a Juris Doctorate from Yale. And then last but not least, just checking to see that you're here, Stephen. We have Stephen Kwong. He's the founder and CEO of Caregiver. Caregiver is partnered with Trinet, and they are a SaaS platform that provides that helps schools with enrichment programs and that helps schools, enrichment programs, and other children's services providers save time and money by optimizing back office functions and enabling mobile payments for their consumers. Stephen has a degree from the University of California at Berkeley and is a very thought leader in the education space. So we're very lucky to have Stephen as well.
Thank you, April.
All right, so I think the best way, I'm just gonna check here if the chat box, if we got anything that came in, okay. So I think who we'll start with is, if we can kick things off, I wanted to share one slide here that I'm hoping will evoke some questions around for everyone. Let me see if I can, am I able to do that, Ed?
Yeah, you should be at the bottom. It says share screen.
Share screen, got it. All right, thank you. We're gonna share. Okay, let me know if you guys can see this slide that says HR pillars. Do you see this now?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So the purpose for sharing this is really just to see if this is to highlight all of the areas in HR. Of course, there are going to be a lot more that might not be on this particular slide, but we use this within the Trinet when we're talking to prospective clients to highlight kind of the depth and breadth and what's all covered under the HR space. So I'll give you guys just a minute to kind of look over that. You can see there's payroll services, benefit options, risk mitigation, technology, and HR expertise. Hoping that today we can cover some of these areas in terms of talking about tools and resources that have helped charter schools navigate during these times and to help streamline and increase efficiencies. So I'll keep this slide up while we kind of go into the Q&A. And I would like to start with James. So James, will you, just to give us a little bit of background on kind of your expertise, can you just provide some insight as to why you created Little Bird and what you were looking for Little Bird to solve?
Sure. So maybe a little bit of background and context on myself. So I actually used to practice law many years. I sucked at it, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life when I was going to grow up. I was doing corporate law, and the reason why, quite frankly, I got to where I was in terms of being a lawyer at a big, large, prestigious law firm was all through education. And so I felt like I wanted to, quote, give back. This was in the early 2000s. So I actually joined a charter school management firm in 2000, the year 2000. Gosh, I'm dating myself. And I started as a lawyer there. And for the first time in my professional career, I really loved what I was doing. I felt like I was giving back. I was working with schools in Southeast Queens and down in Philadelphia and in my hometown right outside Chicago. And I felt like I was using my legal skills and my other skills to really sort of give back. I did that for like 10 years, or actually about 15 years. And one of the things I noticed during that period was that schools were really focused, as they should be, on the education sector or the education and instructional pedagogy issues happening in the school. And right around, 2010 or so, there started to be a lot of outsourced accounting firms that were helping schools manage their money and thinking about, finance and accounting. But when you really think about it from a school perspective, probably about 70% of your budget or thereabout comes out of one little department in the schoolhouse. And we're talking about the HR department. So between employee benefits and also people's pay, which is quite frankly the most important things folks care about other than the children, no one was helping to support that in a real, I think, focused way. And that was the reason why I started Little Bird. And we started in New York, kind of grew over the years. We started working with schools as far south as Jacksonville, Florida, Atlanta, and all over the country. And we saw that there was a great need for expertise in this area because, as you pointed out, April, as you can see on the screen, HR, there's a lot going on. There's a lot that can get you tripped up. But even if it doesn't get you tripped up, quite frankly, it's a lot that's going to keep you up at night, keep you away from your family. Pre-COVID, you're going to be spending more time in a school building versus getting home to your own personal family because you're dealing with, answering a question regarding someone's FSA or, dealing with someone's employee leave. And typically schools don't put their resources in this area. They're getting them in the areas where they're most needed, which is, on the front line dealing with children, and potentially as it relates to the back office, it's like accounting stuff. And so schools typically don't have a large, quote, HR department. And so that was the reason why we started Little Bird. And quite frankly, when we sold the business to Trinet, that was the reason why among the options we had, Trinet was so compelling for us because we know Trinet has a focus in this area. It's really, really needed.
Yeah, we're really lucky to have you because that insight definitely helps us tailor our solution. Since the acquisition occurred, James, can you provide kind of a high-level overview of the insights you've kind of gained while doing your due diligence on schools and what you're finding that they most need during these challenging times?
Yeah, so this particular year, obviously has been challenging more than any other time. And for schools, what we saw was that, with so much happening and so many changes and quite frankly, uncertainty, it really came back to the basics when you talk about the employment relationship. You want to try to make sure people feel comfortable. So this idea of wholesale changes when it relates to benefits was something that a lot of schools sort of took off the table. A lot of schools said, hey, look, we might be able to save a little bit of money and that would be great, but I don't want to switch up things in the middle of a pandemic when it comes to, say, changing from United Healthcare to Aetna or something like that. So that was one of the things that we saw kind of relatedly with the software as well. People didn't want to make changes because stability, calmness, the ability to kind of focus on the things that was most important, like trying to figure out, this whole idea of remote learning, that's where people needed and wanted to spend their time, not dealing with sort of HR. So this idea of having a team, say like a Trinet or a Little Bird or another firm, help support this area became supremely important, particularly as it related to all of the nuance regulations that were coming from Washington and many of the state houses around the country related to leaves and whatnot. People needed to understand what these things meant and how to administer COVID leaves in the right way. So expertise and a partner we found were really the hallmarks of what people were looking for over the last 12 months or so.
Sure. And I'd like to bring Dr. Brown in on that too, just with your experience. I mean, you're on the front lines, Dr. Brown, with your school. What has the experience been like this past year relating to HR at your school?
Thank you. Well, it's hectic to say the least, but I will say, not necessarily for a plug, but we're in our second year with Trinet as our PEO. And so I will tell you what is helpful is that you have that expertise that we just wouldn't have on hand. And most of us, we're independent charter high school. And maybe I worked at a network and occasionally you have an HR team there and it can be fairly robust, but they might miss one or two of these aspects of having competencies in these, sort of 4 columns in here, 4 or 5 columns you have here. But when you're small like us, it's very hard to find someone who's just dedicated to doing this, and then has to go open school doors or, do reconciliations of, not just payroll, but something, close the books for you. Typically, what a director of operations might do. And so, what's been helpful is to have a center of expertise around all these areas. What's been very challenging, I'll give you one thing that folks may not think about, but you should if you're an educator here in the United States, definitely in New York City or New Jersey. When I think it was the 11th of January, and they opened up vaccines for educators in the 1B slide. Well, how do you prove you're an educator? Well, you need to have a letter. And so on that Sunday, that was Monday, on that Sunday, I was thinking, oh boy, we're gonna have everyone calling into our CFO to get them a letter. So wait a second, he said, just go on the platform, Trinet platform, and you print out your pay stub or print out a letter that, I forget the letter that says
employment verification.
Employment verification. And so something as simple as that, but is time sensitive. And of course, then they ran out of appointments by the end of the week, but they're coming back online. That's what I did. And so you think about that utility that is needed and how important it is in a small business to be able to support your employees, so you actually get back to the work that you were meant to do and bring kids into school. So, I mean, there's many different examples of that during COVID, and I had the pleasure, this is my second school during COVID. And so I've seen it, and it's, it's just been a difficult time for all of us. And as a CEO of a school, you're thinking about and now there's new compliance issues, right? You have your typical compliance issues, and when they change, as mayors change or other laws come about, and then you had, how do I deal with, like you said, James, COVID leaves? I had a student say, what about, they're not an employee, but what if they had COVID? How do they get exempted? And you start thinking, and then you have employees come through, and then like us, we co-locate with another school, and so you have the New York City Department of Education rules, and then you have how's a charter school exempted from that, and then all the employee type things that you have to make sure, and you're keeping them with HIPAA rules, you keep them tight. So for one person or 2 people or 3 to figure all that out in a matter of weeks is very difficult. So that's been the challenge for us.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't even know that employee verification letter could be customized in that way. So that's wonderful. I'd like to ask Stephen, because I know that his Cure Cubby works a lot specifically with the COVID, responding to COVID in the charter school space. Stephen, you want to add to Dr. Brown or comment on what he's just shared?
Absolutely. I think Dr. Brown is right on point, to say the least. If there's one thing that we've learned from the pandemic, is that you cannot rely on a constant, and the only constant that you can rely on is dynamically changing variables from the government. So we can expect that to continue to happen. And because of that, schools are now mandated to do all these things that perhaps they've never thought about in the past. So for instance, when a family or a child step on to school sites, in some states, like in California, we have to do attestations. Like, has your family been in a bubble? Have they been in contact with other people? Does anyone have symptoms? All of these things need to be tracked, and they need to be filed and compiled in a way so that those reports are easily accessible. So when we think about how we can help schools mitigate some of these circumstances, we think about technology. So, and I'll do a little pitch for Trinet as well. We are a Trinet partner. So if you are a Trinet customer, you get this from our company for free at no cost. And I'll tell you what it is. Imagine having families come onto the school site and fill out paper forms, or go onto a kiosk and try to type this in. Imagine the amount of time wasted just to compile all of this information. So thinking about technology, our company has leveraged a very simple mechanism where any family can come into the school, scan a QR code, and all of the attestation will be propagated on their phones. And there's just a yes, no, yes, done. All of this is aggregated, compiled in real time into the cloud database, accessible for any administrator at the school to use at their disposal. So now you're fully compliant, but not only that, you're buying peace of mind and also removing the complexity of adding human resources to do this work. So absolutely, I agree with what Dr. Brown has just stated. There's just all kinds of mundane processes that we have to adopt now. And the worst part about it is that you don't know what they are and when they're coming. So having the technology at your fingertips to be able to facilitate these circumstances is going to be a key, not only now, but in preparation for the future as well.
Absolutely. And what would, Dr. Brown, are you utilizing any of these tools at your school now to track COVID and things like that? What's the alternative if you're not using CuraCubby? How are schools doing that?
Well, I'm going to think about that product for something else we have going on. But so one of the things we did, which might be different than a lot of schools because we're a high school, we elected to be fully remote. And then we tried to bring kids in to be sort of hybrid. And it was just this, it is very, very difficult to do. And with older kids, we thought we could survive. They're having a tough time, but I you know, and there's so much tracking that you have to do and tracing that you have to have. And a lot of times in high schools, we deal with some parents, but you're dealing with the actual young adult. So we haven't used or run into a lot of the paperwork with COVID because they're not inside school.
Gotcha. I know that David joined us too. I want to loop him into the conversation. I know we're very eager to learn from you, David, and your experience opening, the first career technical education charter school, and how you guys are now ranked in the top 1.5% of the state. What has your experience been, just given the current environment, and how has your school been responding?
First, glad to be here. Sorry, it's come a little late, but middle of the school day. But and we're a single site, so I'm principal, executive director, and 5 other things. But I'm sure other educators here know what I'm talking about. But anyway, how have we been responding? To COVID in general. I don't think I'm going to say anything sort of radical and new. Like, it's been tremendously challenging. Like being a school leader, network of school leader, district leader this year. I think all the bad parts of our jobs are worse, and all the good parts of our jobs are gone. And so that's really hard. And I think from a sort of HR and risk mitigation standpoint, I think I would say 2 things. One, I was also a labor and employment corporate lawyer, so I have sort of legal and risk management background too. And I'd say, I think, a couple of things about what our experience has been. We were open for as much. We're in a New York City district of education building, so we're co-located with other schools. And we opened basically the first day we were allowed to by the city. We were open the entire fall. We managed to keep COVID free, so we didn't have any cases in school. We had a community. We're in the Bronx. Our community suffered greatly in COVID. Our school community, not just our, parents, students, teachers. Lost family members. It was really tough, but we managed to stay COVID free and in a hybrid model with about 70% of our students coming into school. And so we dealt with a lot of that sort of paperwork or digitized paperwork. And, it was a huge burden, and I don't think there's any way for it not to be a huge burden. I think, though, what we found was that the bigger burdens were actually psychological, and that information and experience were sort of the 2 keys to getting past that. It's we did a ton of work informing our staff, bringing in medical experts, and walking through procedures so that people felt safe. And then You know, and then we found that frankly, most of the anxiety was before opening and not once you were open. You know, we reopened again January 11th, and we did have a couple of COVID cases and had to shut down again. We're fully remote now and about to ramp back up into a hybrid model. And there's certainly psychological cost to going in and out. But yeah, I mean, I think with students and parents, communication has been the sort of key factor. It's like trust is the single determining factor in actually keeping you safe. It's less about, like, people think it's testing procedures. I mean, we ran our own testing program. We are running our own testing program. We do our own tracing because the city is extremely slow. You know, we do all of those things, but that's actually not why we were COVID free. I think we were COVID free largely because we did a lot of family information stuff starting back in June of last year. And so our families felt enough trust to let us know when someone was sick, someone was not feeling well. And so we were able to, like, and they were keeping people at home. And so we were able to actually, like, for the most part, work cooperatively, which I think is sort of the key. But like, I think sort of, I don't know if we're talking about legal risk. Like, I think actually, like, the legal risk to a school is not so great, just because, well, maybe a private school is a little bit of a different situation, but, like, you know, COVID is such like a general background problem that it's like, unless you were wildly irresponsible, there's a sort of pretty solid good faith protection there if you're, like, doing sort of the standard stuff and within the Department of Health guidelines. But yeah, we found the communication was sort of the key to risk mitigation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And with that communication, the rollout and gaining the trust of families, I think you're right, just everyone having that collaborative effort. Is there any type of repeatable process that you put in place that other schools could kind of replicate or do?
Yeah, I always hesitate. I mean, like, yeah, of course, and I'll say some things, but I'll probably, like every other school on here, be like, yeah, obviously we do that. But yeah, so at great personal cost, because I have 2 young kids at home, but we do a family town hall, an open digital family town hall every Thursday. We've done it basically every Thursday, including almost the entire summer, starting in June. Mm-hmm. And a lot of weeks we just get like 10-20% of parents, but then right after, like, it's a good habit to build so that when something happens, good or bad, COVID case or about to reopen again or whatever, like, we get these little spikes. But just that repeatable access has generated a lot of trust. So I'd say, like, one is just, like, doing a lot of poorly attended parent meetings is actually pretty helpful, because then some of them aren't poorly attended. But it builds a sense of access and transparency. And then I think the other thing we do is around anything related to COVID or safety, we make a point of communicating way faster than is required by the state or done by the city Department of Health. And we've heard from the New York City Department of Health that, you know, like, they'll say, like, oh, it's great that you guys, like, reach out so fast, because, like, a lot of schools would prefer that we call first, but they're often calling 48 or 72 hours after something has happened, which then does not engender tremendous trust in families. Whereas if they hear, like, hey, we just found out an hour ago that there was a potential exposure, you know, then people feel like, okay, these people are, like, they're going to let me know if something goes wrong, which means if I don't hear anything, I know I'm, like, safe to send my kid to school. And then we do a lot of videos. We do a lot of video work. So, like, we started our testing program in January. We sent out, like, we literally took video of, like, 18 staff members, myself included, getting a swab up their nose, because we still had kids, high school kids, also Dr. Brown, asking if it was going to poke their brain. You know, we were like, we need to get you into biology, but like, no, it's not going to poke your brain. No, but we do a lot of video work. We did the same thing with the vaccine for sort of early adopters. We did a lot, like, sent out a lot of videos, both through formal channels and then, like, texting out, you know, texting, email. But we just found, like, video to be the best format for, like, making people feel like, oh, this test or this procedure or this whatever, you know, and then all of the sort of theater of safety that actually doesn't generate safety, like temperature scans. We bought like thermal imaging cameras.
Oh, wow.
You know, so you can do it at 6 feet, even though like temperature scans are not really that useful for safety, but they make people feel like, wow, that's a lot. So we'll do that stuff too.
And for the video work, you know, we do that. I feel like all across organizations now. I think we're getting bombarded with so many emails and things like that. It's nice to have a change of, you know, the way you communicate. Are you using any platform that you found to be super helpful, or is it just, you know, a video and you're sending it through email? Any tools?
Yeah, we use some school
using?
communication platforms, but to be honest, the ones we use we're not like super in love with. So I don't think our advice is particularly useful there.
Sure. What about you, Dr. Brown? How are you staying engaged with kind of everyone out there? What methods of communication are you using?
Sure. Well, again, we don't have the severity that David has when you're in school, but it's multiple ways. So not only on our Twitter or Facebook page, but we actually have staff calling parents and students. You know, the phenomenon that's probably affects every grade, but definitely high schools across the country, as I've talked to colleagues, is absenteeism, right? And so when you're, you know, kids who said they wanted to come into school if the schools are open, but then not, I'm going to go back remote, and then they don't show up remotely. Huge problem. And so how do you deal with that? And typically, if the school was open and was no COVID, you know, after a few days, you're calling, you know, certain services, and they sort of take over in social services. But here, one, we wouldn't rely on that too. We're doing that ourselves, calling kids, calling their friends who might know them, you know, calling the parents. And we have our school counselors doing that. And then we don't do it, God bless you, David. We don't do it weekly, but we do a monthly caregiver webinars. And sometimes early in the year, it was twice a month, but monthly webinars. And we just started to do what we mimic in our classroom, start making the video, send the video out. And then the senior team is managing a webinar for parents in the evening. That is, do you have questions about what we sent out? And of course, you know, what did you send out? And you get some of that. But it's just, you know, multiple ways to be able to engage students. Sometimes you have to engage the employees too, when they also, in our school, they also are remote. So they've been remote teaching for about a year. And that has a lot of problems. There's benefits, but there's a lot of problems with that too, as they're used to engaging and co-teaching and co-planning together. And now they have to do that on Zoom, and they have Zoom fatigue. So you have to reach out to them too, to sort of make sure they're fully engaged and their spirits are up. So it's just, you know, I would say the one thing, the one good advice, I think is good advice, I'm giving it out to you for free, so you take it as what it's worth, is so many parents, kids, and educators are like, I can't wait till it goes back to the way it used to be. And I would say, then you're not taking advantage of this crisis. There's a lot of good that can come out to informing our practice of teaching, informing our practice of communicating with folks, using digital assets. So if you ask me, what do we use? I'd be the same way. We use a bunch of stuff. There's a bunch of stuff out there. Ed tech, which I used to deal with 10 years ago, now has come very relevant. So now you have to curate what's good. But to go back to the way it was is probably not the best thing to do if you're leading a team or leading a school or a network, because COVID exposed a lot of inequities and also exposed some opportunities for us to improve what we do. And so if you were to just, I can't wait till it gets normal, I think that's the wrong way to go about that. Absolutely wrong way to go about that. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah. And what it sounds like both of you are echoing is just that over communicating, right? That's how you're gaining the trust and how you're getting everyone to work collaboratively. And I think I like what you said, Dr. Brown, about there's opportunities that have transpired from this, because we can all look at it from the lens of it being this really negative thing, which it is, and I'm not undermining that at all, but it helps to see that there's something positive has to go, and this is the new way we're operating, so we can't go back, we have to move forward. I did have a couple questions come in. Someone mentioned that there's teachers that are refusing to return, because of the fear of getting COVID. This one might not be applicable to you, Dr. Brown, with everyone working remote. It might be, what avenues are recommended to helping organizations deal with these situations when virtual learning is no longer an option? David, do you or Dr. Brown, would either of you comment on that or have any suggestions?
I want the employment lawyer to speak on that.
Yeah. Can we get some free legal advice here?
Well, only licensed in the state of Massachusetts currently. I'm still an attorney there. I gave up my New York bar membership, but yeah, well, the first thing I'd say is I think from a school leadership standpoint, the principals play a really crucial role there. Because a lot of that has to do with sort of trust and culture, more than sort of pure employment, right? So it's if you've got sort of even medium or low trust adult culture, then, and you're in New Orleans, I saw that question was from someone down in Louisiana. So,
yes.
They're not in a situation, but in New York City, right? The background union situation is that there are elementary school teachers in New York are back in session, but there's sort of more flexibility on exceptions in the unionized DOE than in a charter school. It's not unionized like mine, but so you're sort of fighting that a little bit if the background conditions are more restrictive than you want to be. But I would say one, it's a signal of general adult culture. Two, it's often a signal of just general fear. And so one thing that you can do is start working on that problem now. If you want to be back 2-3 months from now, the information campaign starts now. Bring in medical experts, because we have this great doctor who we work with, who's really, really expert in epidemiology and pandemics generally, and having him come in and say yeah, it's definitely a real fear, but also mask wearing, regular mask wearing is the functional equivalent of a vaccine if everyone actually did it all the time. Mm-hmm. And really talking people through studies about why transmission rates in schools are lower and what transmission rates even mean. It's no, we don't have to stop COVID from coming in. We have to stop COVID from transmitting from person to person. And that's actually not the same challenge.
Right.
A kid can be COVID positive in the classroom and you could be 100% or 98% safe if we do the rest of these things right. So, and then I think it's making sure that someone in your organization who has existing relationships with teachers, principals, the ideal role, is the one who's getting really schooled on the details. I didn't know a lot about epidemiology 8 months ago, but I do now.
Yeah.
Because the person who's there with the teachers day in and day out has to be the one who seems really knowledgeable about it. Otherwise, there's going to be a trust issue. Mm-hmm. If it's some HR person, no offense, if there's I don't know if this is an audience of entirely HR professionals, but if it's an HR person who's not with them every day, it doesn't matter if that person's knowledgeable. You need the person responsible for making everyone adhere to the guidelines to be the one who seems to really know what's going on.
Right.
So I'd say that, and then I would just bring a lot of experts and have a lot of conversations, and do a lot of, and I would consider bringing parents in or students in whose kids are really suffering in a remote environment, because I agree with Dr. Brown, a lot of good opportunities, but also frankly, ELL students with severe learning differences. There are kids who are really suffering. And it's if you orient the conversation towards COVID is an operational problem that we have to operate around to serve these kids, and we're going to phase in starting with the kids where the greatest need is, then you'll only have a really vocal minority that's against you instead of everybody against you. And that vocal minority eventually will quiet down once they come in and their arm doesn't fall off, the second day that they're in the building.
Yeah, I think some of the fear, right, is they don't know what what preventative measures you're taking, or what the other, they're only seeing it from the lens that they can see. Okay, I don't want my kid in any trouble. Well, what about the people, like you said, that really need their kid to come into school for those reasons? So is there, aside from, what preventative measures there was a question here about getting vaccinated. Are you going to, are all of the educators getting vaccinated? How are you handling that topic?
That's a good employment law question, but we are not requiring it. There's only one charter network in New York that is, and our position is until the state government requires it, we're not going to, because like the campaign to convince everyone is probably more trouble than it's worth, as long as they're willing to assume the risk. That said, like a number of my teachers are already vaccinated, some are not. I hope that they all get vaccinated. We're definitely encouraging positively, but not in a way that makes it seem like it's a requirement for employment right now, because even hospitals aren't doing that right now. So it's a hard sell if you're like trying to be out there on a limb. And then I can talk about other preventative measures, but I don't know if other folks have thoughts on vaccine.
Yeah, I'll just jump in on that one. I talked to a number of different schools who are sort of following your perspective, David, i.e. they are not making it a requirement unless and until state or federal government does for teachers. Just because there's still, unfortunately, a great deal of fear and uncertainty in certain communities, particularly the Black community, regarding vaccinations and whatnot. And so to require it is fraught with a lot of particular legal issues. I did hear of one school that is kind of taking a different approach, which is trying to promote it and incent it in a certain way. And so they are actually contemplating, I'm not sure if they're actually going to move forward with this, but they're contemplating providing bonuses for teachers who actually do get vaccinated. And I know they were talking with their own independent lawyers, and we were weighing in on it from a Trinet perspective. But that's one course where a school is trying to, get to it. I think they were trying to hit about 80% or more of their staff, and the sense was they weren't going to get there, but for some positive incentives.
Interesting.
I'm not offering bonuses to get vaccinated at our schools, but it is tricky. And I think before there was a vaccine out for COVID, the term reasonable accommodations came up. And I think, all the schools and, organizations like CPICS and so forth started to help members understand what does that mean. I think it will become more difficult as we turn into the next school year, given that you had an administration, they denied the impact of COVID, but you have a new administration who says, I want to get, Kid A back to school, and they're determined to do it. And so you're going to have that market force that is going to say, whether you're vaccinated or not, we want to get these kids into school. And so then the parents will start to drive it. So I think as an educator, you just have to look at what's moving the ball here. And I think you'll have the general sentiment as you go from 2% vaccinated to 20% vaccinated to there might just be a natural expectation. And I think the challenge for our business, because we are small businesses, right? Mm-hmm. With mostly public funds in our coffers, that something's going to happen at probably state or city level that will guide what people need to be able to do. And it's a tough one. It's tough. And also when you talk about reasonable accommodation, my last point would be that is it reasonable? Let's say if you have now 100 kids, 200 kids inside a school, that if you were an operations person, for example, that can you do your job remotely? When now preponderance of the kids are inside school? Answer is no. So how could that, then you go through, well, what's reasonable to accommodate you? And it just gets tougher and tougher where there's all, you have 5 vaccines out there. I'm talking about hopefully in the summertime. They're going to say, what do we do? So I think it's challenging, very challenging.
Yeah, we got another question that came in, or actually it's just a comment, I don't know. This is from Tim. Our public charter school in Indianapolis will be requiring COVID-19 vaccinations for our employees once they are available to teachers and school staff. Indiana is not yet distributing vaccines to educators. We will have a liberal opt-out waiver per our legal counsel. The reason we want to do this is to underscore our emphasis on school safety for our entire school community. We believe in walking the talk if at all possible. So that's just one attendee's view on this for their area.
Yeah, it's interesting just on that point, April.
Sure.
There was a school I spoke to that's going down that pathway as well. Again, once it becomes a requirement, from a state perspective, the question is, how large of an opt-out or how liberal of an opt-out provision do you provide? Obviously, one could foresee, hey, if there's some sort of potential medical issue that puts you at risk of taking the vaccine, one will probably get an opt-out for that. But, what if it's a general fear of that? Like, and how do you prove it and whatnot? And that's, again, going to be an interesting dynamic that comes into play once we get there, if there is some sort of government mandate regarding it.
Yeah, slippery slope, as they will say. It'll be interesting to see how all of it rolls out. Stephen, want to loop you back in the conversation. I know you put together a couple slides I want to get to for the group. Let me just see if we can get there. Do you want to kind of talk to this, or you did talk about this already, the wellness checks and things like that. Do you want to provide any additional insight here on some of the communication technology tools that we've been talking about?
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of what David and Dr. Brown simply stated earlier, is that really the way that you protect your school community is through the abundance of information and a consistent cadence of delivering that information to families. And just as David and Dr. Brown have stated earlier, schools are likely using a tech stack that's very heavy, a lot of different tools. You cherry pick the one that you think is good at the time, and then some administrators may come to you and show you something different. So again, I'm going to do a shameless plug for Trinet. If you are a Trinet customer, we are providing free communications technology for you and your families. And one of the best products that we have is this communications platform called Moments. This is an ideal opportunity for you to not only deliver text messaging, but also videos and photos streamlined in real time. And this will help with all kinds of things. If you have a parent-teacher conference, you can use this. If you're generally delivering a mass message across the entire school, you can do this. This happens in real time. You can carry rich content using the video stream. And best of all, the delivery is fast. You're not waiting on email where the read rate is like under 18%. This is an app, and the parents opt into the app. And again, as a technology company and as also a parent co-founder of a school for children with special needs, this is one of our mission statements, is to provide relevant, bleeding edge technology to help support communities in need. And if there's ever a time to demonstrate that, the time is now. So if you are a Trinet customer, please take advantage of this. It's at no cost to you.
That's great. Thank you. And I'm just want to checking the chat box here, multitasking, make sure we answer all the questions. I think we're good on that. Oh, there's another chat. Oh, I got that one. Okay, yeah, we answered all the questions now. I guess one question that I have, because all of you guys have so much experience just with, even you, David, on the operational side of running a school, and Dr. Brown with your corporate background and also in the school system. What, as we go into this new school year and we're we're being as nimble as we can, and we're trying to figure things out as we go. You know, let's talk about some of those opportunities or things that you've put in place that you feel are going to set you up for things that we don't know to come, right? Like we've talked a little bit about, we don't know if everyone's going to opt into the vaccine, but what are some of the other things you guys are hearing out there that you want to try to plan for, you're anticipating? And I know David has to hop off. So David, if you want to just answer that quickly before you hop off, if you can.
That's a big question. What are we anticipating for next
Like, is
year?
there
And what are
anything
we?
you're hearing about what you're trying to plan for, anticipate coming up?
Yeah, the answer. Yeah, I mean, the answer is everything, right? I mean, it's very similar to last year. I think, like last April, it was already clear that we were going to need hybrid models ready for this year, right? But like a lot of people waited until June and July to start building those. So like everything is parallel planning right now, right? You have to plan for, from an operational standpoint, you have to plan for if you can have normal classroom capacity next year, if you can have 50% classroom capacity next year, and if you're going to have to be still offering a fully remote option in the fall, right? Like it's hard to offer a fully remote option and an in-person option. But you have to sort of have scenario planning for all three of those eventualities, right? We might need a fully remote option still available for some families. We might not. It might be small enough that we could say, hey, like we're not even offering that. It might not. Like we just don't know where we're going to be. So I think like you have to have 3 instructional models. You have to have 3 operational models. Obviously, financial models are complicated because we're all waiting to see what Washington does and our state houses do. But you know, at least in New York, that means another month and a half of somewhat of uncertainty. So I think like the shortest answer to that question is like you have to essentially have 3 plans for everything. The like COVID is still really a problem plan. The most likely like COVID is still a thing, but it's more like it's a little bit more in the background, or like the sort of optimistic best case scenario, like wow, like it's hard to even remember that life was so different 3 months ago, like COVID is gone plan. And you need that for your physical space, you need it for enrollment, you need it for budget, you need it for instruction, you need it for communication. Basically in every element of the school, you need sort of all 3 options, which is terrifying and exhausting if you're a school administrator, but you know, is how I think the like schools that seem like they were the best prepared for this, and the schools that we look up to as doing excellent work, even in the sort of most communities of highest need right now, like we're the schools that started planning the earliest.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining the panel, David. I know you have to step out. We really appreciate it, and best of luck.
My pleasure. Sorry to jump off early, but
that's okay.
Happy to help.
Thank you.
I would say thanks, David, because I'll piggyback on some of the stuff you were saying. I you know, this reminds me, I'm going to date myself, but I was a management consultant at one point in my life, and if you can imagine that companies were built, retail companies were building, they had their brick and mortar, and then they had their internet e-commerce business, and the inventories would not be blended. And there were good rationales. We were part of a big consultancy that was pitching this way of doing things. Now, you would never do that nowadays because you're a lot smarter, technology's gotten better, logistics systems and so forth. So that sort of, this takes me back when you're doing planning, that how you plan for fully, you know, in school, to fully remote, to hybrid. And David mentioned you have to have 3 plans, which is just, you have to do it, but it's difficult. Here's what we're deciding to do, is that we will be, and we told our board, and we're still trying to sell them on this, we're going to be hybrid next year. And that's irrespective of the severity of COVID. COVID still will be around, kids won't, you know, be fully vaccinated, all that type of stuff. But we'll be fully hybrid. Why? Because we don't want to lose that. We just outfitted 400 kids with tools and gave teachers and math teachers iPods, and moving, even this year, we have moved to some flipped classroom models, and the way we use videos and differentiated instruction inside the videos, and want to work with kids. But what that means is that you go outfit your school where you might have had 20 classrooms and a whole bunch of offices, that you have to make like a study lounge for kids. So, and this is a high school too, again. So there's kids who could have 5 or 6 classes, 8 periods a day. There's some, the older ones might have 2 or 3, but you have to have some type of, how are you going to hold them, right? And we don't own our own building. So you got to, how do you outfit it for people who are coming in at different times or want to hang around for, hopefully we get into scholastic sports up again. So they want to hang around for that. We also are a college preparatory school. So we're going to literally have college courses going on inside our school and so forth. So it makes you change and sort of hedge right now how your physical plant looks inside the school to be able to accommodate this. How do you accommodate where they may not allow you to go into the lunchroom? Again, we have another, there's a middle school in the building. You may not be able to use the lunchroom the way you used to. The same with the auditorium, how you do assemblies. And so I think you just sort of, and the kids will adapt because kids are very adaptable. It's the adults that are tough. So it's just, when you go into a planning process, like I said, you might just say, what can we just count on for next year? And say, we're going to build this sort of hybrid type, infrastructure. So when we need to go fully remote, like we are today, is normed for the kids. But then I can bring in some of the, learning, kids with learning differences. Who there's a lot of kids who don't have a learning difference or IEP. They're just in a bad situation at home. And if you have to think about folks, I don't want to be so biased because I'm here in New York, but there are folks, I remind teachers, there are kids who are in a 2-bedroom apartment and there's 6 or 8 people in there, and that's how they've been living life for a year.
Yeah.
And so just think about that. Sometimes I know we've had children who come to the school to switch out a computer. There's nothing wrong with the computer. They just wanted to get out.
Yeah.
And that was the excuse. And they came and we tested. There's nothing wrong, but here's a new one. We'll probably see you in a couple of weeks. But so I think that you just have to anticipate, be really smart. And the maybe last thing I would say, this is where in this crisis that's sort of ongoing. So it's not over a month or not even a year, is you're going to see who can lead, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to see who can lead and who can collaborate with other schools, whether it's within your city or across the city. You're in a group like CPEX and you're sharing information, because that's how you're going to get smarter. So I think that's important.
Yeah, you have to lean on each other. And I think too, just what you said about the infrastructure, and maybe James, you could speak to a little bit about what features and things we're trying to do to help bridge that gap and build that infrastructure out so that they can focus. So, the schools can focus on what they need to versus all the byproducts here. Could you speak to that a little bit?
I was thinking about that entirely because, whether you are like David, you're going to parallel plan and think about it in 3 different dimensions, or like Steve, you're just going to pick one. And we know we have people from Florida and other states on this call who are going to be open. It's not even a question. From my perspective, the way to sort of another sort of framework is, what are the things are going to have to be in place no matter what, right? And how do you best prepare to optimize your organization? And so from my perspective, I lean heavily on this idea of leveraging technology so that you can do the job in at the highest level for you and your team, and ultimately be able to get home to your family. So in the area of HR, for example, really take a look at how you're currently set up. There are certain things that as a school, that are routine. Things like in, say, March and April, when you're thinking about people who are coming back next year. Are you still dealing with paper and email and trying to figure out, who's coming back? And my kindergarten teacher, they want to switch, right? There's technology that takes care of that for you now. We're dealing with schools, right? Somebody's going to get pregnant. They're going to go out on leave, right? Are you still dealing with paperwork yourself, or someone on your team dealing with that? And so there's technology that makes that process far and away easier for you. And there's obviously a team that can help support that. So things like that, certification. How are you handling your documents? When you have someone, you send them an offer letter, is it done signing off electronically? there's technology that takes care of all of that. That was one of the things that we built at Little Bird, and now that we're here at Trinet, we have built technology that's specifically for schools, that specifically drives those processes for you and your team, so you don't have to do it. And so I would encourage you to look across your entire organization, certainly in HR, but even beyond that, and figure out ways where you can bring some efficiency, leveraging technology to make your lives easier, and quite frankly, the lives of your team.
Thank you, James. And I know we're wrapping up here. It's definitely the things that have always been around as kind of what we needed to do already. Those we need to like get the systems in place, and let's push that one aside because we have a lot to plan. We have a lot that we need to plan for that's unexpected. So, well, I really want to thank Dr. Brown, James, Stephen, and Edward. It's been an absolute pleasure leading this panel, and we're really grateful that you guys made yourself available and shared such great knowledge. Edward, would you, there's a question there asking if we can share the PowerPoint. Will you be sending this PowerPoint out? And one other just little thing before you answer that, my colleague, Ardell Stout, is very upset with me because I misspelled her last name on the contact us. Her last name is Stoute. So if you're gonna send an email or an outreach, we'll make sure we correct that before sending it out. I'm human, people, I'm human.
All right.
Start with the quote with humility.
Yes, I'm wrong here. But will you be able to send it out to everyone, the PowerPoint?
Yeah, so
Edward?
we'll definitely follow up with everyone who's registered. We'll have the recording up on our website of this session, and then we'll send the PowerPoint out as well. So yeah, thank you guys so much.
Perfect.
Good information.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.